Between the years of 1997 and 1999, Archie gave Knuckles his own solo book, courtesy of one Kenneth W. Penders II. While the series overall certainly made some questionable choices, not counting the 3-issue miniseries that preceded it or any specials, the book ran for 32 issues. And in the world of comics, that is pretty respectable in my opinion. A lot of books I hold dear never escaped being just a miniseries. The comic definitely came to a premature ending, as Penders had plans all the way up until at least issue 50. The reason commonly stated for this is poor sales, because why does anything get cancelled in comics? And while these claims are usually never accompanied with a source, Comicron, which tracks estimated pre-orders from North American comic book shops, lends a bit of credence to this. Even at its peak sales for issue 9, it lagged well behind Sonic. And from there, it did have a mostly downward trend of readership, continually selling less than the main book and the specials. I do think cancellation did probably hit most of the Archie team by surprise, being that they did take pre-orders on issue 33, which never came out.
Oh no!
And it, along with issues 34 and 35, were turned into the backup stories for issues 79 through 84 of the main book. So the comic's final story was probably not meant to be its final story. That being said, what was the book's swan song? After all, a strong final story could leave a lasting impression, or at least allow the book to end on a high note. So what did the Knuckles book end with? Well, it ended by introducing us to a new villain who bears striking similarities to the Spider-Man villain, Kraven the Hunter. And since we're both getting the third Sonic movie this month, as well as Kraven's cinematic debut, I figured the stars have aligned for me to talk about this story. While on a personal level, I am absolutely sure Kraven served as a bit of inspiration because A, the character's name is just Hunter, and B, look at him. They are both, at minimum, inspired by the same story. The Most Dangerous Game is a 1924 short story written by Richard Connell, and despite it only officially entering the public domain in 2020, it served as the inspiration for tons of media. The story follows big game hunter and author Sanger Rainsford, after he finds himself stranded on an island upon falling off his ship. He eventually happens upon an opulent home there, owned by one General Zaroff, a Cossack man who left Russia during the revolution and, like Rainsford, has a love of hunting. He has read Rainsford's books and is evidently a fan of his. Believing he has found a kindred spirit, Zaroff tells Rainsford how he has grown weary of hunting, as now no animal proved to be any challenge. But rather than give up his passion, he seeked out a new form of prey, one that can reason. Realizing Zaroff is talking about hunting human beings, Rainsford states he'll have no part in murder. Unfortunately, this only results in our protagonist becoming Zaroff's next target. The story, along with its 1932 film adaptation, is undoubtedly the inspiration behind Kraven the Hunter. Leslie Banks' portrayal of Zaroff definitely provided some aesthetic inspiration because, again, look at him. The story itself is practically name-dropped by Kraven in his first appearance. The short story describes Zaroff as both having unnaturally good tracking abilities and incredible reflexes. It also hints at Zaroff having human trophies, while the 1932 film just shows them. Very grisly for the time period this movie came out. I think the head in the jar is creepier though. There's tons of official art now featuring Kraven with similar trophies, though you can argue this goes back quite some time. You could say back to his first appearance, though I more interpret these to be Chameleon's masks. Undoubtedly though, issue 34 of The Amazing Spider-Man has a very clear allusion to it. This is all to say, even if you come away from this video saying, that wasn't based on Kraven, you'll at least see that Hunter and Kraven the Hunter share some creative DNA. Now they did have Knuckles do a Spider-Man thing a couple of issues later. This storyline, King of the Hill, runs from issue 30 to 32. Our story opens with Hunter shooting down a bird, who turns out to be a friend of one of Knuckles' friends. Neither of these characters end up mattering too much. This is more of a means for Knuckles to find out there's someone with a gun on the island. Other odd thing about this scene is Knuckles is reading 2001: A Space Odyssey. A very Ken thing to put in. We cut away from Hunter to be introduced to Monk, a purple primate that was Knuckles' childhood bully who was exiled from the floating island by being tied up and thrown into the sea by Knuckles' father and the rest of the Brotherhood of Guardians, with him nearly drowning. Bullying is bad. This feels like a disproportionate response. Also, side note, Kraven first showed off his abilities in the Marvel Comics by battling escaped gorillas. Do with that what you will. Anyway, Monk has returned to the island blaming Knuckles for his past ordeal. The two scuffle is broken up by the arrival of Hunter, who incapacitates Monk and tells Knuckles to freeze. Hunter tells Knuckles that he's studied him for quite some time, which is why he's here. At the same time, a large man-like creature rises from the bushes and carries Monk back to Hunter's ship. This is RU-12. Hunter's manservant. This is another reference back to the short story, as Zaroff had a large silent servant named Ivan. While Ivan plays a pretty notable role in the story, especially in convincing people to partake in Zaroff's game,
Ivan is such an artist with these. Invariably, Mr. Ringsford, invariably they choose to hunt.
This is the only time we see Ryu. Weird, considering there is a moment they could have used him in a similar role, but whatever. Hunter takes Knuckles aboard his vessel, where he mentions he both knows of Robotnik and doesn't really like him, noting the man is simply not a sportsman. Then Knuckles happens across Hunter's trophy collection. Somebody go check on Sonic.
Whoa!
Knuckles asks what kind of monster could do something like this, causing Hunter to fire a warning shot at him. Noting he could have just easily shot his foe in the back, he challenges Knuckles to a contest of strategy, to be hunted by him, threatening Julie Sue's life in order to make him cooperate. Monk and Knuckles are then outfitted with shock collars that turn on every time the two get too far away from each other, forcing the would-be enemies to cooperate. The two decide to hide in Hydro City, Hydrocity, argue about it in the Comment City. Hunter is able to track the two down very quickly, discovering the hatch they took. With the two quickly being closed in on, Knuckles tries to put a trap together for their pursuer, only for Hunter to begin firing on them. Thanks to Hunter being far too distracted with Knuckles, Monk is able to sneak up on their attacker, tackling him to the ground, screaming at him to take the collar off. However, Hunter is able to land a fatal blow on the primate, tossing him aside. Knuckles, overcome with rage, unconsciously taps into the Chaos Force, both shattering his collar and firing a blast of energy at Hunter, leaving him unconscious. Locke and Archimedes, who had detected the intruders on the island earlier, come to investigate, happening across both the unconscious killer and Knuckles attempting to attend to the now passed primate. Hunter is placed in a prison pod for his crimes, Knuckles commenting that he wants him to rot for what he had done to all his victims. As a final story for the Knuckles comic, it's kinda not great. I wouldn't call it bad, but it's also nothing special. It's a lot of ideas that aren't fully developed. Clearly, it wants to build Hunter up as a credible antagonist and for his villainy to hold weight. However, the bird he kills and Monk are introduced in this arc. There's no real opportunity to get emotionally invested in either of them, which is a shame in the case of Monk. Had he instead been introduced in prior issues, there's an actual chance this might have been more resonant. Hunter's presentation is a bit off too. His introduction works, but during the hunt we get a lot of thought bubbles from him. I think that's a misunderstanding of the type of character both Zaroff and Kraven are. While Zaroff gives lots of speeches, during the hunt the reader is primarily in Rainsford's head, the horror coming from the uncertainty of what the hunter might already know. Kraven gets monologues, but a lot of his more poignant moments are almost entirely visual. Despite both being these verbose, aristocratic characters, during tenser moments, there's a wordlessness to them. The reader knows everything they need to just by looking at them. I think us knowing everything Hunter is thinking works against the story that's trying to be told. Also, I know the book is working within the constriction of its length, but it's kinda disappointing that we only get a hint at Knuckles constructing traps for Hunter. So much of the most dangerous game is Rainsford using his own hunting experience to counter Zaroff, and a lot of Kraven stories are Spider-Man having to be more clever than his pursuer, because Kraven isn't just a guy you can punch real good and win. You have to outsmart him. So it's pretty disappointing that this story reaches its conclusion by Knuckles hitting him supernaturally hard. So, is that it for Hunter? No, actually, he returns once more, about 5 years later. Issues 138 through 141 featured the story Return to Angel Island, written by Carl Bollers. This isn't the last story Bollers would write for Sonic, but you could say it is one of his final major contributions to the book. These issues are him pretty much getting to play around with the world that Ken created in the Knuckles solo books, as our heroes venture back to Angel Island when Knuckles hears that his father had been captured. Honestly, the story might be worth a deep dive on its own one day, just to compare how Bollers handles the Knuckles Knuckles lore against Ken. But that's for another day. Let's focus on Hunter. Near the end of this storyline, it's revealed that Hunter has not only been freed, but has been recruited and enhanced by Eggman, as well as being outfitted with a control collar of his own. Oh, the irony. He's looking very Vegeta. He sets about capturing the inhabitants of Angel Island, sending them to be drained by the egg grapes, as well as nearly stealing the Master Emerald. At a critical moment, Knuckles is finally able to re-tap into his chaos powers. It's a lot to explain, it's a whole thing, and transforms into Super Knuckles. Grabbing Hunter, he flies him high above the island before launching him far off into the ocean. I don't know if it's a conscious parallel that this is visually similar to what happened in Monk's backstory, or if there's only so many ways to throw someone into the ocean. Don't take this as a review for the whole storyline, because I'm just going over Hunter's part, and it is a story with a lot going on. That being said, I do like the way Hunter's being handled here. Like, giving him powers might be a little bit much, but the cold-blooded huntsman overconfident in his own abilities is very clear in his personality. Even when facing off with Super Knuckles, he's still defiant. Unfortunately, he never shows up again after this story, with it pretty much being assumed he dies here. Crazy, huh? Honestly though, I don't know where you could have really gone with him from here, so maybe that was the right decision. Hunter is one of the oddities of the Archie Sonic comics, and surprisingly, one that isn't talked about too often. While I don't think he necessarily fits in the world around him, I think his initial story is one that just needed to be refined. Tons of different series have done their own twist on the most dangerous game, and I don't think a Sonic version of that is a wrong idea. Though honestly, you could probably have Eggman capture someone and hunt them because he's a messed up dude, rather than make a whole Kraven XP. Despite the original Knuckles book's less than stellar sales, I think it's time to try to give him another solo series, something beyond a one-shot. It's been more than 20 years. He's gotten a TV series. Shadow has a manga. We cannot live in the shadow of Ken forever. The little mini arc they gave him in IDW in issues 62, 65, and 66 was really fun. I would like to see more of that. But should you read Hunter's first appearance? I guess, if you're curious. But honestly, you should check out the original film adaptation of The Most Dangerous Game. It's the same production team that did the original King Kong, with most of the same cast and even the same sets. It's crazy to see if you're familiar with the original King Kong. Thank you so much for watching. I've honestly been thinking about doing this video for a long time because conceptually it's so interesting to me. And after a longer one like the Rouge one, it's nice to just cover a small handful of issues instead. If you want to support what I do, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, or supporting me on Patreon. And a special shout out to my $5 patrons, Ned Rex, Nate DM990, Diddly Do, and Queer Kaiju. See y'all in the next video.